Hey there, film enthusiasts, and welcome back to my Cinematic Exploration Corner. In this segment, I'm delving into the lives and careers of three iconic directors who share more than just their heritage. Francis Ford Coppola, Martin Scorsese, and Michael Cimino were three filmmakers who rose to fame during a period that nurtured risks and innovation, only to face a colossal failure that forced them to reposition themselves in an industry that had changed completely. This final set of episodes focuses on Michael Cimino, the mysterious director who quickly became the toast of Hollywood, only to find his career almost ending at the hands of the infamous production of Heaven's Gate, his third movie. So grab your popcorn, settle in, and join me as I unravel the stories of three directors who faced the highs and lows of the industry, showcasing the grit and determination that defines true cinematic visionaries. By 1977, the cinema landscape had changed once again. Much like what had happened a decade before, there were new emerging trends shaping what was popular and what audiences wanted to see. Steven Spielberg's Jaws, released in 1975, invented the blockbuster concept, but was arguably seen as a one-off. You could easily make the case that if the shark had worked, and thus appeared more in the movie, the tension and effectiveness of the phantom threat wouldn't be present, making for a considerably weaker movie. Effectively, the movie does not employ any special visual effects or a constant overload of epic shots. It did, however, reintroduce a notion that would dominate Hollywood for the following decades, that of the high-concept title. A high-concept title is a film with a premise that can be easily summarized in a sentence or two and has the potential to grab the audience's attention immediately. These movies often tap into universal themes, emotions, or fears that resonate with a broad audience. They also rely on visual spectacle, innovative special effects, and larger-than-life scenarios to capture the audience's imagination. Safe to say that if Jaws laid the groundwork for blockbusters and high-concept movies, George Lucas's Star Wars, released in 1977, elevated the concept into a new ground, effectively signaling a new change in Hollywood. Both titles, created by two leading figures of the new Hollywood movement, contributed to the movement's demise. But for all their merits, they didn't do it alone. After years of dealing with the bitter end of the Vietnam War and Watergate, Jimmy Carter's election as president in 1976 came with promises of change and a new chapter for America. His administration, however, delivered something else. Stagflation, economic hardships, and America's vulnerability in the global geopolitical scenario were just some of the aspects that contributed to the nation facing a crisis of confidence and an inability to shake off the distrust they had in government. The feeling was also being felt, to different extents, across the Western Hemisphere. Audiences and the people that comprised them just simply had enough hardships in their own lives to be willing to part with their hard-earned money and watch a bleak and gritty movie. They yearned for a healthy dose of escapism in their entertainment sources, much like the audiences of the 1930s did during the Great Depression. In Hollywood, the new Hollywood auteurs were still in charge, but the budgets they required to deliver their visions were making executives nervous. High-profile flops proved their concerns to be right, and studios started to channel their funds into movies audiences actually wanted to see. If we take a look at 1977 and 1978, we can see two distinct examples that illustrate this reality. William Friedkin's Sorcerer was predicted to be the biggest hit of the summer of '77. With a $22 million price tag, the movie made only $5.9 million, being blown out of the water by Lucas's Star Wars, a title that cost roughly half of what Friedkin's movie had cost. Similarly, Martin Scorsese's musical extravaganza, New York, New York, cost $14 million and underperformed in '77. 1978's biggest box office earner was another musical, Grease, which delivered $160 million in revenue on a $6 million budget. Apples and oranges, complex versus high concept. These results dictated a new strategy for studios, investing in visual spectacle-driven vehicles as opposed to story-driven, experimental, and grim features. Even as the new Hollywood movement entered the last stage of its life cycle, which lasted roughly between 1977 and 1982, there were still some figures emerging and embodying the core principles that defined the era. Names such as Ridley Scott, David Lynch, Walter Hill, John Landis, and Michael Cimino, who had his major commercial break in 1978. To this day, Michael Cimino remains a mystery, an enigma that rose through Hollywood ranks without a verified trace. At different stages of his life, he presented different birth dates. His filmmaking background was never tracked properly. He even claimed, during the promotional tour for The Deer Hunter, that he had served in Vietnam as a medic with the Green Berets, having joined in 1968. No information to corroborate these claims was ever found, leading us to assume that Cimino had lied. But the few things that were actually verified make for an interesting story. Cimino's inclination for the arts led him to attend Yale University, where he graduated with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in 1961 and a Master of Fine Arts in 1963, both in painting. He got his start in New York, where he directed documentaries and industrial films before moving to advertising. He then directed ads for Cool Cigarettes, Pepsi, Canada Dry, and Maxwell House Coffee before delivering his most famous commercial in 1967. The United Airlines ad was an early sign of who Cimino was as a director and visionary. Dynamic and filled with lavish set designs, it showcased the trademarks for which Cimino would be known. The aspiring filmmaker then met commercial director representative Joan Corelli, who encouraged him to pursue screenwriting. The first tangible effort of this new venture was the 1972 script for Silent Running, co-written with Derek Washburn and Steve Bocco. The screenplay would become the first official sign that Cimino had arrived. One of the spec scripts penned by Michael Cimino made its way to iconic Western leading man Clint Eastwood. Cimino had written the lead role with Clint Eastwood in mind after having co-penned the script for Dirty Harry's sequel, Magnum Force, in 1973. Eastwood had been keen to star in a road movie ever since 1969's Easy Rider put the genre on the map. The actor-turned-director was impressed by the script and was not only interested in starring in it, but also directing it. But upon meeting Michael Cimino, Clint Eastwood gave the aspiring filmmaker the director's job. The title, Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, was a quintessential road movie, mixing comedy, drama, and action. The title focused on the unlikely partnership between a veteran thief, Thunderbolt, played by Clint Eastwood, and a young drifter named Lightfoot, played by Jeff Bridges. Together, they plan and execute a series of daring heists across the American Midwest. Eastwood was pretty much hands-off when it came to the pre-production, but his filmmaking style and persona exerted a strong control to avoid any potential excesses. Cimino, grateful for his first shot as a director, generally abided, even if unpleased with the decisions. The Sergio Leone collaborator was known for not wanting to do more than 3 takes on any given shot. He would occasionally relent, especially if his co-star, Jeff Bridges, was the one asking for an additional take. That was the exception, not the norm, and whenever Michael Cimino hinted at stalling or overthinking, Eastwood would take over and rush the director to move on to the next scene. The 47-day production went smoothly in terms of scheduling and budgeting, but there were reports about disagreements between the star and the director, especially as the production went on, contributing to a strained working relationship between the two. But everything ended well when the movie made $25 million on a $4 million budget and earned Jeff Bridges a Best Supporting Actor nomination. Cimino had now his first commercial success under his belt and was ready for his next project. As for his relationship with Clint Eastwood, safe to say that there were no hard feelings, with the Italian-American filmmaker making some uncredited contributions to the Eastwood-starring vehicle, The Outlaw Josie Wales. The movie's success led to Cimino's name being attached to several projects, including an adaptation of Oliver Stone's script, Midnight Express. The director also tried to push for his preferred projects, such as an adaptation of Fyodor Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, a remake of Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead, and his very own script based on the Frederick Forsyth novel, The Dogs of War. But the forces of fate and his reputation in the industry would select his next project. The story behind the production of The Deer Hunter dates back to the 1960s. Producer Michael Deeley bought a spec script titled The Man Who Came to Play. Deeley felt that the script was incomplete, and after discovering Michael Cimino, he believed the director was the right person to finish the script. Roy Scheider had originally been cast in the role of Mikhail Vronsky, but withdrew from the movie 2 weeks before the shooting was about to start. He was replaced with Robert De Niro at a cost of $1 million. John Cazale, Christopher Walken, John Savage, and a then unknown Meryl Streep rounded up the cast. The Deer Hunter, the epic war drama that follows the lives of three steelworkers from Pennsylvania, Michael, Stephen, and Nick, and how the Vietnam War profoundly affected their lives, had a troubled production. Cimino brought once again his meticulous attention to detail and his demanding approach to filmmaking, which sometimes led to tension on set. Additionally, his insistence on shooting numerous takes and his tendency to deviate from the script contributed to a tense environment during the location shots. With no Eastwood equivalent to keep the director in check, Cimino showcased his true colors. His penchant for authenticity was extreme. For example, in the scene where Stephen is yelling, "Michael, there's rats in here, Michael!" as he's stuck in the river, actor John Savage was actually yelling at director Michael Cimino to get him out of the water, and not calling for Robert De Niro's character, who was also named Michael. By December 1977, The Deer Hunter's production had been completed, with the movie going over budget, ending up costing between $12 to $14 million instead of the original $8 million budget. The increases were attributed to the unexpectedly harsh physical demands of shooting in Thailand and the challenges of dealing with the country's bureaucracy. But by 1978, Universal, the studio behind the movie, had a new challenge on their hands. They were finding it difficult to market the war title. Enter Alan Carr. Carr, a former producer turned marketing and promotional consultant, had turned Saturday Night Fever and Grease into box office mega hits and was passionate about Cimino's movie. Carr coined the term Oscar consultant and pioneered what is now considered to be the gold standard process for Oscar campaigns, a process that would later be refined by the infamous producer Harvey Weinstein. The consultant orchestrated a massive plan that included several parties with Hollywood key figures to generate word of mouth and even air the movie on TV via the cable channel Z, a niche channel subscribed by many Academy voters. He then persuaded Universal to open the movie in December 1978 to gather additional support from the critics and to use the engagement to qualify the movie for the Academy Awards. The movie would receive a wide release on the 23rd of February 1979, 3 days after the Oscar nominations deadline. When the nominations for the 52nd Academy Awards were announced, The Deer Hunter nabbed 9 nods, tying with Heaven Can Wait for the most nominated film that year. The nominations sparked an almost immediate backlash from both prominent Hollywood figures and the Vietnam Veterans Against War Association. Among its most outspoken detractors were Warren Beatty, whose directorial debut had won big at the box office and at the Golden Globes, and Vietnam War protester Jane Fonda, who had starred in Coming Home, another picture depicting the war and a direct competitor at the Oscars. But on the 9th of April 1979, despite everything going against it, The Deer Hunter won big, nabbing 5 awards, including Best Director for Michael Cimino, an award handed to him by Francis Ford Coppola, and Best Picture, an honor officialized by staunch right-winger John Wayne. Cimino was on cloud 9 and overnight had become one of the most celebrated directors in the industry. He could have chosen any project at that point, but long before the award ceremony, he had already made up his mind. And the dark clouds that would dictate his downfall were approaching fast. Clouds in the shape of Heaven's Gate.